Turn on your inner light show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is Michael Pantalon, Ph.D., faculty member of the Yale School of Medicine, consultant, speaker, therapist, and author of Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything. Let's try this new approach to create change in others, even ourselves. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think this is a very important topic because we all want to change for the better. Most important, we love to give everyone else advice. So why do we need to do this? Why do we need to change other people? What are our deepest motives for doing so? That's fascinating for me.
It is, and it was for me, as you can tell. But, you know, the fact is that we're influencing people day in and day out, moment to moment, without even realizing it. So I thought, why not use the science of motivation and the science of influence to teach people how to do it effectively, as well as how to do it for good, so that they can help their family members or friends or colleagues move forward in a positive direction, whether for their health or work.
That's a good point, for the good. But what gives me, let's say, just before we get into all these wonderful points, and they were very, I think, hands-on in how to effect change. But what gives me the moxie, let's say, to go think that I know what's right for you?
Well, you know, we take a stab at it. We say we're a concerned bystander, and we simply say, this is what I think might be good, but let me ask you a few questions. So you don't need that much moxie to do instant influence to say, I definitely know this is what you ought to do, but you have a starting point. You have a target that you think could be helpful, but you don't stay wed to it. So, I mean, people ask me this all the time, like, who am I to influence someone else? Well, if you're involved with them, then you have a right to do that for a good reason and towards a healthy target. And then if the person says, look, I don't want to lose weight or get healthy in that way, but I might want to do it this way, then it's incumbent on the influencer to try to shift to that. So it's not a rigid position that you have to take.
That's a very good point, because sometimes we give people advice and we spend time with them. Mm-hmm. Then in the end, they don't take our advice and we get so angry.
That's right. You know, it's worse when we try to do it in this sort of roundabout, passive-aggressive kind of way. And my thought is that, I mean, I've seen families and couples and businesses work together well or really poorly over all these years, and the ones that work well are the ones that are direct about it. They don't force, but they are direct about their intention to try to make things happen. Because if they don't do that, it comes out one way or another, and, you know, if you're not direct, it'll come out in a passive-aggressive way, and that's when fights happen, like you're mentioning.
Now, before we get into the methodology, which involved questions, you know, which is great because you really got to something so brilliant here that I absolutely loved. The why. The why. I mean, if you're going to change and you don't really know why, I mean, we're always focusing on what to do, how to do it, but we forget the why. And that was so beautiful, so simply elegant. But the first thing what I'd like to do is ask you, what shouldn't we say? I want to get to what we basically do say, that and there's always a problem with that.
Well, that's a great place to start, because half of my approach is repeat what not to say. So that's a brilliant place to start. So before we get into the methodology, here's a short list of things you should not say. Things, by the way, that our society has taught us to say, and they're just plain wrong. When you start a conversation with someone who you would like to influence by saying, you know what your problem is, ... that's just going to tank. You should never start out that way. And you should also never start out convinced that you have the answer. You're trying to influence someone to get their motivation mobilized to do anything positive. You may not have the right what to change or how to change, but you're going to provoke their thinking about why they want anything to change. So don't say you know what your problem is. Don't be firm about you having the secret to their problems, the secret solution, and don't tell them your reasons why they ought to change.
See,
this is a conversation about them, not you.
That's so clever, because we always end up giving our reasons,
right.
And that may not resonate for the other person. We're
Absolutely.
Always doing that, right?
Yeah. Even if you know the person really well, Debbie, and you know exactly what their reason is going to be. I've seen it happen where when they're told that that's their reason, all of a sudden it doesn't matter to them anymore. It only matters if it comes out of their mouths and processed through their brains.
And basically, we sometimes think we're mind readers, and we shouldn't be so, because there might be deeper reasons or tangential reasons as to why this is happening. So how do we motivate someone else, Michael?
Okay. So I forgot to give you perhaps the most important thing you don't say. Don't tell someone that they have to, ought to, better, or must change. That confrontational stuff just does not work with resistant people. So that's perhaps the most important one that I left out. Don't say you have to, even if you feel like they really do have to. If they really do have to change, then the way you're going to get them there is to avoid saying the have to. That only breeds more resistance.
In light of what you say, I think that makes sense when someone has an unhealthy condition, or
right.
if you're a supervisor in the workplace and you're dealing with someone with anger management issues, or who you push his buttons. And I thought that the book it was surprising to me how well it targeted both hemispheres of personal health versus the workplace.
Because in my world, I think of myself as a motivation expert. The same stuff works at home, at work, in relationships, for health, for business. We're all the same way. No one wants to be told what to do or even why we think they should do it. The only way they're ever going to change is that they hear themselves argue in favor of it. And that's what leads us to the methodology. That's what that methodology is all about, is to get them to talk about their own reasons why.
That power of choice. Well, we choose to go to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Michael Pantalon, author of Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything. And really, the book tells you.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Light, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving, and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Dr. Michael Pantalon, author of Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything. Now, I think we're ready for the change talk, Michael, and
right.
Maybe you could anchor it in what's going on nowadays with the obesity epidemic. We're even thinking of taking children away from their parents. We never mind taking away commercial advertisers, but
Well, it's become such a huge problem that people are throwing out all sorts of extreme solutions. But the way that I look at it is through the lens of motivation or influence science. And that takes us away a little bit from what someone should eat or what they should not eat, and focuses us quite a bit more on why the obese person would want to change this. And that kind of throws a lot of my audiences for a loop, because they're all thinking, well, we know the evidence. It's terrible for their health. It's terrible in many, many ways, currently and in the future. So we don't need to talk about that. Everyone's accepted it's bad. But the person who has the issue needs to think very concretely, in a more immediate sense, how they will feel differently about themselves if they make this change. That's what truly motivates us when we have to do some really tough behavioral change.
Okay, so that's a good point. So how would we begin, effecting that change in someone we love?
Good. This is good. I like the way you set it up there, because we have what not to do, and then we have a great example of where we need to talk more about the why. And the first way we begin is to tell the person that they do not absolutely change. And again, it's another thing that throws my coachees and audiences for a loop, but that gets us in the mind of the person we need to influence versus what we think about it. So if you're a doctor or a parent of someone who is struggling with obesity, the first thing is you say, look, I know we've pressured you before, and we've kind of said, you have to do this and it's very dangerous. That's one set of messages. But the other is that only you can decide whether or not you want to do this. And that puts the power back into the person, and it gets them to start thinking, okay, well, if I did want to do this, why would I decide to do it? And that's exactly the mindset that we need them in when we start the 6 questions.
Okay. So that makes so much sense, giving someone that power of choice. I choose to do it. I don't choose to do it. There's nothing adversarial. There's nothing where someone's superimposing their will. This is not hypnosis. So then what happens? I know we wouldn't have time to even go through all the questions, because they're really wonderful. But to get us started and give us a little tasting menu.
So here's the tasting menu. The person hears you don't have to change. They're less defensive, more open, and you say, would you mind if I ask you a few questions? And when they're less defensive, you say, sure. The first question, and the most important question of instant influence, is why might you change? And every word in that question is very, very important and describes the basic philosophy of the instant influence approach, which is why. Give me reasons, not methods, but reasons why you might decide this is worth it to you. And the word might is important, because you're saying you might decide to do it and you might not. That honors their autonomy, and it's empowering. Mm-hmm. And the word you means give me your reasons. Don't just regurgitate the reasons that your doctor or mother told you. Tell me what would be in it for you. Because when I interview kids or adolescents, the reasons they want to change are vastly different than the ones that their parents or doctors or teachers have for them. And it's only their reasons that are going to change them.
Yes, I could totally see that. That's excellent. Second question.
So, after they answer this, it's important to do some reiteration or reflection of their answer. So if the kid says, look, because I want to have more friends, and when I'm eating badly, I kind of hide out and isolate myself. So you want to reflect that back and say, the reason that you would want to get on this program is because it would allow you to not isolate yourself. You'd be more social. So you want to feed back their good reasons, and you want to ignore if they say, but it's hard and I don't want to do it. You just leave that alone and reiterate the good stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it creates this positive dream. So you're not focusing on beating yourself up with a stern inner critic, but you're looking at what could be. And that's brilliant, actually.
Right. And you notice it's nothing about health, and it's nothing about possible medical issues down the road. It's about a more immediate positive consequence, which you need when you're making a change that's going to take a lot of behaviors now and for the long haul. The second question asks the person to scale their motivation. In other words, here's the question: how ready might you be to start this new weight management program and just try it out for the next 2 weeks. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 means I'm totally ready, 1 means I'm not ready at all, sorry, and 10 means I'm totally ready. 1 is not at all, 10 is totally, and you got to get the person to give you a number. And this is important because most of the time when we're trying to influence people, we throw down the gauntlet. We say, are you going to do this? Yes or no? And too often, we give them an opportunity to say an easy no, and the conversation's shut down. This question broadens it out and says, even if you're a little resistant, tell me about that little part of you that might want to do this. And most people say a number that's higher than a 1.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's really opening the dialogue now and creating this opportunity for change.
Right.
Because you have a number now that's already moving towards change. You got the
That's
person
right.
thing. It's very, very good.
And you know what, the people I coach, you know what they tell me? They said this is the first time that I felt comfortable saying that it's okay that I have a little bit of motivation. Everybody wants me to have it all or none. And that motivation doesn't work that way. Motivation is on a scale. And the only way you can move it up the scale is if you catch it and honor it and reflect on it, no matter how small it is. You let the person know it's okay if you have very little motivation. We're going to focus on the part that is motivational versus beat you up about the part that isn't.
Again, that positivity bias. Well, we're
Right.
going to a commercial break,
Sure.
and we will return with Dr. Michael Pantalon, author of Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything.
Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is a message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers.
We're back with Dr. Michael Pantalon, author of Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything. So now I've got this scale, and I've got someone who's already moved, actually, by giving you a number. What's the next step? I wonder, did we lose our Michael Pantalon?
No, I'm right here. I'm right
there.
here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Before we go to the next question, that person that you've just asked the ruler question to may look at you like you have 3 heads because they're not used to this kind of silly question. It's important for your listeners to stick through that and to handle any little embarrassment or silliness they may feel, because that silliness factor is important. Because when you act a little silly or funny or ask an off-the-beaten-path question, you actually are more likely to influence the person.
Oh.
That person's surprise makes their defenses go down even more. I mean, think about, have you ever been, if any of your listeners have had a surprise birthday party thrown for them, imagine that moment when you walked into the room and everybody said surprise, you were a little thrown off. That's what these questions do. They kind of throw you off and they make the person think. So persist through any silliness or embarrassment and tell them, yeah, I'm serious. It is a kind of off-the-beaten-path question, but it's important. Sound good?
Yes, and you know what I like about it, especially if you can use a little humor, it's like Mark Twain. You can teach a moral lesson with humor. You get people suckered into accepting rather than resisting, so that's good. So now for the third, because we so don't have time for this marvelous program. But what would you say? What would follow after that?
If somebody's given you higher than a 1, which is 99% of the cases, you say, why didn't you pick a lower number? Now, everybody stumbles over this one, so pay attention. The question is, why didn't you pick a lower number? Everybody wants to know, why aren't you more motivated? But the right question is, why aren't you less motivated? When the person hears that, they say, well, the influencer is saying that's good that I have some. What makes me at all motivated? And then they start to tell you things that get them motivated. That's the question. It's an off-the-beaten-path question again, but irrational questions tend to motivate us better than rational ones.
Yes, and sometimes going the opposite route really gets you to put everything together, and it's empowerment, and it gets a person thinking rather than giving the first answers that come off the top of their head. I like aside from the program having so many examples that you give us and dialogues with people, I like the personal one you had with your father. I mean, yes. That was so honest.
Yeah, it is, and that's possibly the toughest one I've ever done, because when you do it with somebody who's a loved one, a family member, even a very close friend, your motivations are necessarily mixed up in it. You can tell them all you want that it's up to them and you're not there to force them or nag them anymore, but that history is there. So you have to acknowledge the history a decent amount before you get started. Saying it's up to you has to really be believable. You have to mean it, actually. But, I heard my father say things on that day that I had never heard him say before, and I knew it was because I had been nagging him, and now I was putting my money where my mouth was, and it worked.
And I think it also worked for me for looking at it, a couple of steps removed. Your father, and you made that point as well, your father is a very powerful person, and he's your father, and I guess, here you come and you had to navigate this role change and how to get someone who's a benevolent dictator in your life to do that. So I think that was part of the dynamic too, that sometimes we're afraid to tell the person in power.
Right. It is. So, but let's keep that lesson in mind, because this is not just to motivate people laterally or people who are below you, like kids or employees, but you can motivate upwards or influence upwards. You can use this with your boss, but tread lightly. Prepare.
Well, that's a great way for our segment to conclude. That's great. And I urge everyone to read Instant Influence, How to Get Anyone to Do Anything, especially learning how to motivate yourself, which is really one of the goals of the book. Now, do you have a website we can visit?
Yes, it's www.MichaelPantalon.com, and that's spelled MichaelPantalon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest, and I'm going to try these methods out rather than hitting my husband over the head with a frying pan.
Right, let me know how it goes, and if it doesn't work, the book is pretty hard. You can hit him with that now, too.
Thank you. I'll throw the book at him.
Thank you so much.
Be well. Affirmation of the week. There are small joys that occur so routinely you forget what they mean to you. And now for the latest medical trends. We were speaking about obesity today. A new study that looks at weight change over decades finds that the obesity epidemic in teens and young adults has its roots in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Smartphone users reading text messages and internet pages hold their devices at a closer distance than they would for printed text, which will have important implications for prescribing vision correction, according to a study in the July issue of Optometry and Vision Science. Pregnant women face a risk of stroke that is 2.4 times higher than the risk in non-pregnant women. And here's another point about obesity that I found interesting. When obesity spreads, notice the line, the pun, and this is like birds of a feather flock together, because a new study from the University of Arizona showed that people do cluster according to size. So maybe you have to choose your friends more wisely. An updated review of studies confirms that compared to staying sedentary, strength exercises boost bone density in postmenopausal women with osteoporosis. And I have to say that lowering your salt intake has little effect on heart risk. That's the new research now. While cutting down on salt might lower your blood pressure, there is no evidence that it leads to fewer deaths from heart attack and stroke. Yet the study cautions you don't have to go crazy shaking on the salt. Hedge your bets. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management, totally free. TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. All the radio shows with the guest experts are archived for your listening pleasure. Subscribe to my free newsletter at TurnOnYourInnerLight.com and you'll get the latest radio shows, a fresh new article on stress management and relationships, and the health tips fully delineated, emailed directly to you from TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. Have a wonderful week and see you on the radio.